Shalom, shalom, family. I'm going to say the Lord's Prayer and then we're going to have a conversation about something. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread and forgive us of our trespasses as forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on the righteous path and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. Just going to do a sound check. Make sure everything sounds okay. All right. All right. All right. So let's talk about something. I'm gonna, as always, fair use, but I'm gonna show something that I think is really interesting. People are starting to pick this up, right? I was showing for a while the out of Africa idea had hands because we were showing real scientific papers that just came out, stuff from the 2020s, 2021, 2022s. That's basically showing some very important information about the OOAH, which is out of Africa hypertheus. It's not standing when you actually compare the fossils, but rather it's showing support for a OOEH, which is actually out of Eurasia hypertheus. That everyone actually started in the areas out of Africa, but in Asia. So look, check out this interesting video made by this individual. Highly compelling. Let me just show something real fast and talk about it because we got to talk about this. Hold on, I got to
A
reopen.
recent scientific paper has
All right. I just had to reopen it. Tab had popped out. All right. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or anything while we play this video, definitely voice them because this is really revolutionary. This is really revolutionary.
A recent scientific paper has suggested that Homo erectus was in fact the first Homo sapiens. Indeed, a new species, what is being called Homo sapiens erectus, is throwing a huge wrench in the works of human evolution. Lately, the out of Africa hypothesis has become disputed, and a new hypothesis has been proposed, the out of Eurasia hypothesis. An evolution. Lately, the out of Africa hypothesis has become disputed, and a new hypothesis has been proposed, the out of Eurasia. Lately, the out of Africa hypothesis has become disputed, and a new hypothesis has been.
All right, so hold on. Now, if you've seen his little channel, now he's obviously using sources on this one. So he's going to be using, I'm going to just click on the two sources that he's clicking. So here's one I just opened, right? You can see right here, and it's talk about the same thing that I was talking about the out of Africa hypotheus and a OOAH and a OOEH and whatnot. We was just having a conversation about this just recently, right? We was one of the first ones to bring this out because we seen that some individuals had an interest in Neanderthal admixture, right? But some other ones better than the Sovins. I'm also going to talk about some other stuff I found. But let me point something out. Let me go to a video that we made. I'm just going to go to the video and point it out. Talking about. Because I had a feeling for a while, a lot of stuff would fly over people's head. Let me just go over here. Right here. Okay, so you see this video right here. So this video was the video that we made 100,000 years ago. Let me just point it out. So it's really deep. All right. I made sure I rewatched it because when I watched it, I thought that a lot of stuff that went about was just kind of like really new and blowing my. It was blowing to watch it a few times to make sure what we were actually bringing out was actually scientific because it didn't make any sense how much information it was of it, and yet the whole world was still saying people came out of Africa. So just hear me what I'm saying on this one part right here, and then we'll talk about it real fast. remember they came from Eurasia. They know that these came from Eurasia because that A is Russia. So Eurasia is actually showing you that from Eurasia, they all break and they make all these other individuals. That's very important. The analysts identified a Eurasian Y DNA, basically letting us know that is, you know, connected, right? That's that A00 right there. You see what's going on there? That's very important. Let us know about that A00. That was followed. So remember, Eurasian, identified a Eurasian Y DNA, A00. That was followed by 3 separate HSS, which are Homo sapien exoduses. Other Homo sapiens are A0, A1, and A. So you see what's going on there? All right, this video, I'll put in the description, but this video was a longer video, right? I've rewatched it and I couldn't believe it because I was saying to myself, are we really in a time where we're finally coming to the sense that the out of Africa idea was actually eugenics? Let me show you something because that's what I was expressing on this video is that we know that the out of Africa idea is based on eugenics. Let me just read something real fast. So here's something that I always try to bring out and let everyone know when it was brought out that when they tried to, because this is the thing about science. People should be able to reconstruct something. If something is scientific, you should always be able to reconstruct it and get the same results. But when they tried to reconstruct the out of Africa concept to put all fossils in Africa coming out, that wasn't what it was showing. That's why it said reconstruction of out of Africa concept as not having enough proof, right? Because when a geneticist tried to put all the pieces together himself with obviously with all the information, it showed that they were coming from somewhere else. But let me read something that he says on there. Before the 1980s, there was almost no discussion on the African origin of modern man. Now, why is that important about the 1980s? We'll come back to that real fast. Let's just go to a real quick note on something. All right. We had talked about a very interesting science that the world thought was a real science, right? It goes by the name eugenics. But what's interesting about the information of that time is that a lot of different pieces of information came out very quickly, such as the out of Africa concept that has no backing by actual fossils, right? You'll have a lot of imaginary things coming out in that time, like the down man and things of that sort, right? Lucy and all that, right? A lot of crazy things that came out at that time. But let me point something out that I think is kind of interesting. Some geneticists were pointing out something really interesting when they were looking at older fossils and putting them next to the mtDNA and kind of linking things together. Obviously, they found out something really interesting that I want to point out real fast on this little paper here. Let me just open it and point it out. I didn't bring this out yet because I was still reviewing it and seeing if it was really what they were saying, because they were just talking about how the mtDNA basically is rooted in Asia. I'm just going to read you a quote from the site. Difficulties with this model includes the basically, I'm just jump a little down to just basically talk about the different frequencies in the autosomal and the Y and mtDNA ages. And it says the Y haplotype A00 with age, and you know how A00 is supposed to be really old, like 300,000 years old. It says no evidence of first appearance of fully modern humans in Africa. This is what's important because this is finding out that the original A00 lineage doesn't appear that it appeared first in Africa. Seemingly, data for just talks about basically, different regionalism, right, within Africa and for multiple dispersals into Asia. Fossils with AMH features. It just talks about different fossils and whatnot that they have different names that I'm just going to skip, right? Different names of certain fossils and everything. I'm just going to jump down to right here because it just talk about those fossils in comparison and everything. While the AMH fossils found outside Africa have been assumed to originate in Africa. Now, here's where they break it down. They're saying that the fossils, they're talking about some old fossils, and they're saying that they're assumed to originate in Africa, because that's your basically how you say a modern human. That's why they talk about your basically your correct human, right? Your modern human, right? What's important though is that it's letting you know that it's been assumed to have originated in Africa, right? But watch what it says here. An origin in Asia has not been included. And then watch what it says here. In fact, in 1983, researchers have derived an mtDNA tree rooted in Asia. Now, hold on. If they had pulled evidence of an mtDNA tree rooted in Asia in 1983, why do you think that wasn't brought out? Because in 1980, let's go back to over here and talk about what happened in 1980. All right. Before the 1980s, there was almost no discussion of an African or an African origin of modern men. The subject was rather marginal. Okay, so what happened in the 1980s? Right? Just look at a simple matter called eugenics. You just go to real fast, point out. So let's quick summary on what is eugenics. Like, what's the thing about eugenics and whatnot? Let me point it out for you. That's kind of interesting, important to know about. So eugenics, what's the deal with eugenics and whatnot? Well, since 1980s and 1990s, right? 1980s, 1990s, the new associated. Then they just talk about pretty much. Long story short, it was a time that we had to break it down because we already talked about this. Remember, we would talk about the Nuremberg trials, and we talk about how the connection with the Nazis and stuff. This is why we had that video. We did a video called "By the Mother," right? We talk about eugenics and how eugenics was a mindset that was science that the world was running with for a long time, that was used in a lot of racist practices. Um, if you go into it, everyone knows now that eugenics is not a real science. A lot of people know this already. They know that it's not a real science. It was used at that time to establish things that people still use today. That's what's important. Things that people still use today is from the origins of what is called eugenics, right? And we have went into the deep depth of it. Is basically the mindset of selective breeding. That's basically what it is. A lot of things rose up in the idea of eugenics and whatnot. The idea of that is very important to know that it's not a real science. Right? Long story short, but the most important thing is this, right? It rose up in 1980s and 1990s, right? They thought it was a real science, right? Even though I'm probably sure here it'll let you know that it's not a accepted science, right? Just talks about science fiction and whatnot, but there's other places that go into depth onto these things, onto eugenics, right? It was a set of beliefs and whatnot, but it wasn't considered real science. And that's why I'm going to show you today that the out of Africa concept was born from that. All right, so before the 1980s, there was almost no discussion, right? No discussion on the out of African or the African origin of modern men, right? The subject was rather marginal, right? There were two reasons, right? They already know that they had. Remember, we talked about the Homo erectus. They already know Homo erectus was outside of Africa. So to conclude the because who we are, everyone who's today is considered quote unquote, right, children of genetic Adam, right? That's a true scientific term. Is that they say the lines of A and B, D and E and CF, those are from genetic Adam, right? I believe that genetic Adam is more connected to a reality of Noah, right? But that's understanding of self. But let's get this understood. They already knew that there was an ancient human, right, that was outside of the areas of Africa. Now, I already said this because remember, I said if we listen to the biblical narrative, it tells you that the sons of Cain dwelled on the east side of Eden, right? And it say the South, right? And it say people just dwell in the South for to eternity. But we see that a good understanding of reality, even written in the word itself, that people were outside of Africa. And we're seeing that with science, right? But that was something engineered that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about. So that's what's important. They know that the earliest humans were outside of the areas of Africa. So you see how at this time there was no discussion of it. But then they had a discussion about it when they had established it. But what happened when they actually had pulled, instead of the eugenic method, scientific method proved that the mtDNA itself was actually Asian. You can see, unfortunately, this model was overlooked without anyone ever explaining why the Asian model was less valid than the African mitochondria E model, published 4 years later. You see what's going on there? So it's very important. So you got that movement going on from 1980 to 1990s. You got to kind of got that whole movement going on. And even though they had some results that saying this thing, they're basically talking about another. So that's from here, right? It's a real genetic paper, right? Modern human origins, right? Just talk about the multi-regional evolution of autosomes in East Asia, origin of Y and mtDNA. So that's a real paper. That's a real paper that was right. These are things that are starting to build up, because this is just what happens when you try to hide the truth. You know, if you try to hide the truth, this is just the type of things that start to happen. Is that a generation is going to find things that have been implemented, and the reason why might be very shocking. So, and this is just another piece of paper I'll go into another time, that apparently the mtDNA might be actually twisted around. That there might be, instead of everyone coming from L, everyone might be coming from an R group. That's different in mtDNA. I'll talk about that another time, because that's kind of deep. But let's keep on with this little video, because there's another little thing that's coming out relevantly soon from someone that I've been keeping watch on what he's doing. Obviously, with a good understanding of, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Discernment, right? Having a good understanding of discernment, but breaking down some of these false theories that the Darwin movement had going on, and also other movements of eugenics, right? So that's what this is talking about real fast with the Homo erectus. So and we had talked about it because we know that it goes further back than that, right? We was talking about that it goes much further back than that. We was talking about how they had found. Let me go over here and point something out. How they had found in the Australia Museum, right? In the Australia Museum, they got evidence. Let me see if I can find it here. Somewhere up here. I think it's right here, I think. It's just a little thing I threw on because having a conversation with somebody. Let me just see if I can point it out, if I can find it. I think about where it's at. Let me think. But yeah, it's a important little paper, because it basically points out that I think is kind of important, which is origins. Let me just see if I can grab it real before we dive into that, because I want to point this thing out. I'm always putting a little piece of information, but this one is like a side note. I think I added, yeah, I added right here. Yes. Let me go to it real fast. It's like a little side note that I wanted to make sure I just put out there. Here it is. I need to make sure I move this little note, because I need this little one. I'm added to one of my notes. All right, let me just read something. Why I'm showing this, because what it basically talks about is what we just talked about, the Homo erectus, that early human that they call that, right? It's going to be a human that they say was basically came out of areas of Africa, but apparently, right? However, an alternative theory proposed that Hominins or humanoids migrated out of Africa before even the earlier, because this Homo erectus came from this Homo ergaster. How you say that? But it's saying that even Homo ergaster is believed that humans even before Homo ergaster, which let me just show how old that supposedly is, right? Just to get an idea. Let's see if we can just put the age real fast. So right here it says up to, you can see like 1.6 million, right? And obviously, like I said, when we go over these things, obviously it's exaggerated. But you can see right here, it ranged from 1.7 to 1.4 million, right? That's obviously before all modern human beings and whatnot. That's going to be very important. So it's like, it's basically saying like a time before the children of Noah, right, got off the ark, humans filled the earth, right? Makes perfect sense. So you can see right here, it says that other humans would have left the whole place of Africa a long time ago, right? It says prior to the earliest dates of Homo erectus in Asia. So it's letting you know that these lineages will be outside of the areas of Africa, right? And it just talks about they perhaps too, like they obviously have some areas of evidence that they would be outside of Africa, right? So very very interesting stuff. But let's go a little more into the breakdown of it, because I thought this was interesting that the world's starting to catch on to the truth, right? The truth.
Out of Africa hypothesis disputed, and a new hypothesis has been proposed, the out of Eurasia. In a recent paper, titled The Reversal of Human Phylogeny, Humans Left Africa as Erectus, Came Back as Sapiens Sapiens, the authors outline their new theory, while debunking the out of Africa hypothesis. The authors show that Homo sapiens evolved from Homo erectus, after Erectus left Africa around 2 million years ago. The study used phylogenetics to calculate that Homo sapiens originated in South-Central Asia, in the region of Western India. And due to recurrent ice ages causing population bottlenecks, several different lineages evolved, including Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo antecessor. The study considered all these groups to be subspecies of Homo sapiens, rather than separate species, as has been traditionally used. In this model, Homo sapiens evolved almost 1 million years ago, then split into these several lineages around 600 to 800,000 years ago. For most of the 20th century, much of the Western academic world believed in the out-of-Africa theory of human evolution. The theory proposes that hominids evolved in Africa until the emergence of Homo erectus. About 2 million years ago, Homo erectus left Africa and spread throughout Europe and Asia. In Europe, Homo erectus evolved into the Neanderthals, while in Asia most Homo erectus stopped evolving. As regards to the morphological distinction between sapiens and erectus, the authors of the study recognized them as subspecies, Homo sapiens sapiens and Homo sapiens erectus, in accordance with their overlapping morphology. Genetic testing of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA has found that they contributed to the genome of all humans outside of Africa. This demonstrated that Neanderthals were not a unique species and could breed with Homo sapiens, supporting this phylogeny.
Verging here. There's an dirt and turned it into there's an old saying Divers have found sunken ruins of cities that were well below sea level. Now, an event happened that raised the temperature so high that the ice started to melt. And the massive amount of ice melting led to the rising of the seas, 400 feet of rise in sea level.
According to Out of Africa, most Homo erectus stopped evolving, exception of a small group in the Indonesian archipelago branched off to become Homo floresiensis. Unlike most of the Homo erectus in Asian environments, which stagnated, the Homo erectus that stayed in Africa continued to evolve and eventually became Homo sapiens. Then, about 100,000 years ago, modern Homo sapiens left Africa. They spread throughout the globe and conquered or outcompeted Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus. The last Neanderthal died out around 30,000 years ago, somewhere in Europe. In the study of human evolution, Australia has not traditionally been believed to have much to offer. Nonetheless, the skeletal record of Australia has thrown a few wrenches in the works that may one day transform beliefs about where humans came from.
All right, my bad. I think for that whole time, I think I had clicked this thing on accident, but I'll quickly summarize real fast what I was talking about because I was talking about a lot of stuff. So a bunch of stuff was probably just moving around the screen. Like, look at this. Let me just talk about real fast what it is because it's a quick summary. Let me just quickly summarize it. All right. So you notice how throughout this whole thing, we've seen that humans started in this area. We've seen that as humans left out of that area, they filled the whole earth, right? We've seen how it even talked about how the DNA in the said Neanderthals and Denisovans that came from the said erectus and whatnot, it shows that all those were that they can obviously have babies with every other human because they would be humans. And that's what I was talking about, that your ultimate root would be your genetic Adam, but your scientific Adam would be all modern humans, which actually would be coming from your biblical Noah. So every single person today would be your A and B, your D and E, and your CF groups that would come from one group that survived what was a catastrophic wipeout. And that's what's important to understand, that all ancient humans actually show that they separate by a node. And that's why I was saying that there's a separation at Seth and Cain. And you can see a separation, an early separation that's wiped out. And that's why we was talking about the Younger Dryas, the events of the Younger Dryas. That the events of the Younger Dryas actually shows a Y-DNA bottleneck and a event of rising of water. That the water rose 300 meters, almost 400 meters. And we know that the water flooded the earth, right? And that's why I wanted to show you real fast on here that this person actually talks about it, about the Younger Dryas event that we know had without a large amount of and had flooded
Rising
the
of the
earth.
seas, 400 feet of rise in sea level.
The water rise 400 feet. It rise 400 feet, or 400 meters rather, and actually flooded the whole earth. And that wiped out a lot of people, and that caused a genetic bottleneck. And that genetic, all that happened at the same time. The flood, that flooding event, the wiping out of all those people, a genetic bottleneck of the male line, where every single male is coming from the same family, everyone's related, having a Y chromosome atom, which we should expect. All these things are spoken of in the biblical narrative. Every single one of these. Someone can say no all they want, but this is what we're seeing. That the world was trying to pass an out of Africa concept, but the out of Africa concept is not showing enough proof, nor is it showing that it was established by actual facts. Right. So that's very important. Let me see how much. That's why I always do a sound check. I must have clicked it halfway through. All right, not too much. All right, all right. I was making sure I didn't clip out too much of the sound. So that's why I wanted to show you that real fast. I just wanted to quickly summarize what I was saying all that time. I would just talk about how all of that was being said, the scientific method actually points to the biblical narrative, right? And you can see without a doubt. Anyone who looks at the genetics at its full entirety can see that there was, exactly as the scripture said, there was a mass extinction of lots of species. There was a catastrophic flood. That's why I was showing you on that video that they have buildings, right, at the bottom of the sea that were built before the water rose up. There was a different. The water wasn't this high at that time. Everything looked different at that time. It rose up 400 meters. I wonder, could we show that real fast? 400 meters, what that looked like. Let's see if we can find something 400 meters. Let's see. Oh yeah, the run, 400-meter run, right? Put that. Maybe we can put a comparison. Well, it's as you can see, it's a lot of water, right? Just to get that, just to get a good understanding of that, right? I gotta think of something that's 400 meters. I wouldn't know if I can even put 400 meters to stretch it out, because a 400-meter run goes in a loop. So it's not really a great illustration for how much water rise. That's 400 meters, though, right? You could probably find something, an example to demonstrate that. That's a lot of water that rose at that exact same time. So that's what I'm saying. The scientific method and the biblical method is in agreement. That's what I'm saying. The scientific method and the biblical method is in agreement. And that's where we're also seeing that the out of Africa concept is not standing to the truth. It's not actually standing to the truth. But let's continue, because this little video just it's giving you that insight on all those things that I was talking about. Right? So that's what this right here was. Right? Just kind of click on and just show real fast what we have, right? Just talks about the origin of human species and everything. That one was from 2021, right? And it was talking about something that not a lot of people probably would expect when they're taking in the information of the Neanderthals and then the Soviets and whatnot. Let me click another one. And then this one, if I recall, this was the one that, well, this is probably just a different site. This is the one that Nope, this is the same site. He's talking about the same information that I was talking about as well. There's obviously a lot of different sites that speak of these different things that find them very important. Here's another one. I just want to show you that this is what's about this is the future. What I'm showing you is the future. This is the real future of the truth of what's going to happen. That the whole world's going to know that there was no out of Africa concept, and few people are seeing it firsthand like this. That is rising up from its hidden places. That's just another copy. These just all talk about the same thing, right? I just want to show you how many times they're talking about it. So this one as well. This one as well, if I recall. Well, I'll close that one. I'll just talk about the mystery of peoples. All right. Here's a little more on it. Just want to show you, then I'm going to kind of flip through it. This one as well. It seems like a lot, because it is a lot. A lot of this is recent. All right, you look at the year. Let's see if I can find a year on this one. Right? This one's 2016, but this one's connecting your Neanderthals and modern humans, and that was kind of the beginning of it. The beginning of it was connecting that modern humans actually made it with them, with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and that kind of changed the game on how old they actually were, for them to have relations like that. Because that wasn't thought, no one thought that was going on at first. No one thought that they were connected like that. But you can see this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one's a copy. 7. So like this is like 7 sheets. That's talking about the same exact thing, right? That's just talking about the same exact thing. And obviously there's information around it. Most likely there's still more on here. I just want to grab some of the quick ones. That's talking about pretty much in these places here that you see the stars at. That's where most humans show earlier signs at. From this area here going to these areas. So you can see that, remember, just like the biblical narrative says, that they started around these areas, and we find earlier human evidence in these areas. Because remember, it talks about how they went up to the mountains. I talked about this before in a read of history, that they were talking about they went up to the mountains, and then Nimrod called them down. They didn't go down at first, but they were waiting until Nimrod called them down, because no one wanted to go down into the valley because they were scared. Because the low valley, they were scared of the flood. After the flood, a lot of people were scared after the flood. That's why that thing happened with Nimrod, and he said he'd be avenged on God because of the flood. But God confused their language. That's actually the real reason why they was confused, because they thought they would be gods and be above God, right? They thought they can escape his judgment, pretty much. Long story short. Or even in the sense of basically being able to do whatever they wanted to do, and no one could tell them nothing. And even if a flood was to come, they would have no destruction, they would think. So it was basically just stopping that build there, right? It's in that, it's actually interesting when you think about that concept of stopping that Tower of Babel. If you read in the New Testament, in Revelation, it talks about when your walls are to be built, it's going to be removed far from you, right? And it talks about that in the Old too, in a cross reference. But getting an understanding of this is where people started, right? That's where people started. So I think that's really important to note, that we have a lot of evidence that the out of Africa concept was actually a made up concept, and that modern humans' origins are actually in Eurasia. That's actually what we're seeing, rather than an out of Africa concept. So that's very important to know, that that's what we were bringing out for a long time. But let's hear some more.
This demonstrated that Neanderthals were not a unique species and could breed with Homo sapiens, supporting this phylogeny. According to Out of Africa, most Asian Homo erectus stopped evolving, with the exception of a small group in the Indonesian archipelago that branched off to become Homo floresiensis. Unlike most of the Homo erectus in Asian environments, which stagnated, the Homo erectus that stayed in Africa continued to evolve and eventually became Homo sapiens. Then, about 100,000 years ago, modern Homo sapiens left Africa. They spread throughout the globe and conquered or outcompeted Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus. The last Neanderthal died out around 30,000 years ago, somewhere in Europe.
All right, you heard that? This is why it's important. That was a common theory that the last Neanderthal died out about 30,000 years ago, right? The Younger Dryas event was about 12,000 years ago. So what something happened in between said 30,000 years ago and to 12,000 years ago, said ago, right? On the outer Africa concept scale, that an event had happened and caused a catastrophic wipeout of all these subhumans that were related to other humans, but were genetically different than other humans. When I say genetically different, that means from a different line of fathers. They're from a different line of fathers, not from the same line of fathers that we're of. They're going to be a separation as soon as you would say maybe Cain and Seth. So you'll have a major line from Seth, and then from Noah, who is from Seth, you'll have these three sons that survive after a major catastrophic wipeout that every other subhuman that we can find today does not make. Your ancient modern or your modern humans are not going to come from your Neanderthal or Denisovan, right? We talked about that on how those roots go. That none of the Neanderthal or Denisovan branches make people today, which we should expect if it was a son of Cain. That we should expect them to be human, but not actually create someone today. But they should be able to be related to someone today, right? Because Cain doesn't make any line of Seth. So that's important when we note these lines, these wiped out lines after a catastrophic flood event that happened. So let's also take a note that it lets us know that they were in Europe, though. It lets us know that a lot of these individuals were in the areas of Europe. So keep that in mind as this plays.
In the study of human evolution, Australia has not traditionally been believed to have much to offer. Nonetheless, the skeletal record of Australia has thrown a few wrenches in the works that may one day transform beliefs about where humans came from. However, Australia has a significant number of fossils and archaic DNA, such as the Cow Swamp and Mungo Lake fossils, that have potential to illuminate the human evolutionary story. Sadly, the interpretations of these finds are being stunted by the adherence to the out of Africa model. According to traditional migration theories, Homo erectus or any other archaic human never reached Australia and was believed to have died out before Homo sapiens reached Indonesia in excess of 100,000 years ago.
You see what I'm saying? You see why this is important? Because just like how he was pointing out on one of these videos, let me just back to it because I just realized that we're gonna need this paper. This is why when I went back and looked at it again, I'm like this is the truth. This is what we're bringing out is the truth. But it's just that people aren't ready for it yet. They're just not ready for the truth. And it was a real is a real feeling. It's a real that when you bring out truth at first, it first seems like it's harder it's harder to it's more easier to just give someone the same message than to tell them that they've been tricked, to show them they've been tricked. But this is what I'm saying. So this is from the Australia Museum. I'm just reading it because I don't know if you heard me when I said this, that they was talking about the Homo erectus and his parent lineage actually shows even before them. It actually shows that they actually was found outside of Africa before they was in Africa. So that's something that's important to know about. That's what we was talking about real fast on this thing. They was talking about some of the early hominins or humanoids were actually found outside of Africa long, long time ago. We're talking on their scale millions of years ago. That it kind of changes their whole perspective, right? Read it real fast on the screen if you ever want to freeze it and read it. And I'll put this, maybe I'll put it in the description. I'm just gonna make sure I copy it this time. All right. So that's what he's talking about. He's also talking about that too, that Australia had some finds that they found out that about 2 million years ago, the first of our ancestors moved northwards from their homeland and out of Africa. So it's basically saying that it's evidence, long story short, of humans outside of Africa. That's what's important, is that there's going to be ancient humans outside of Africa. That's going to be very important. And that's what this video is talking about. It's going on into those things. But again, it gets deeper.
The last Homo erectus died out somewhere between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago on Java. The last hobbit is believed to have died out in a volcanic eruption around 10,000 years ago. After conquering Homo erectus in Indonesia, Homo sapiens moved to Australia. If Homo erectus had made it to Australia first, then they too would have been conquered by modern man. Ice Age Eurasia was just too inhospitable for nomadic Homo erectus, so they let Neanderthals and Denisovans occupy those habitats. In the Indonesian archipelago, the ancestor of the hobbit may have been cut off from migration routes due to changes in sea levels or volcanic activity. Consequently, they also become a unique species, called Homo floresiensis. Sea levels during the recurring ice ages were up to 300 feet lower than today, exposing a vast landmass, known as Sundaland, in the region of Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Gulf of Thailand. Java would have been at the edge of this landmass, and the furthest point to be connected to mainland Asia.
All right, let me say something else, just in case if you missed what he just said. He said on this little map here that the world before used to, the water, remember how I was talking about the land of Eden, how it used to look different up here? And I talked about how this area actually used to be all connected. This area used to be connected before the Afar Strait, and that these didn't have water here, and even this one didn't have water. The water rose 400, almost between 400 300 feet, and that's what he just talked about. He said long ago, when the world, right, when the sea level was 300 feet lower, right? Just show that again. So he said that the world was 300 feet lower than it was today, right? So that's very important. So you can see right there where it was up to 300 feet lower than today, right? You can see, very important. I was talking about that before with proto channels and how the world looked at that time. That's important for understanding the movements of people, how they can move at that time, how they can feel the world. So you can see all this would have been one piece. I was talking about that, how all this was one piece. A lot of us look at it like, areas of Asia, Middle East, and Africa today. Back at that time, they would just been looking at it like one piece of land, right? Because it all would have been connected. They just would have been walking all across these areas. So I believe that Eden was over here, but then the flood covers up to this day that remains of the area. So that's very important to know about. That this is a reminder that we gotta not just look at who was there at that time, but how the world looked a long time ago. Now, I obviously understand these years are exaggerated, but it's important to match the data to get a logical conclusion, right? To make a logical conclusion, even biblically, right? To look at it logically and put the whole picture together logically. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that the biblical narrative makes perfect sense. If the world water level was lower and today it rose up 300, 400 feet or meters, we're seeing events of a catastrophic flood and wipeout of masses of people. So again, it's just showing us the spread of those ancient humanoids that would have been, again, connected to lines of Cain or earlier humans, or even the fallen ones that came down. But that's a given.
Exposing a vast lands known as Sundaland in the region of Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Gulf of Thailand. Java would have been at the edge of this landmass, and the furthest point to be connected to mainland Asia. If out of Africa is to be believed, then human occupation of Australia has to be less than 75,000 years. Exactly when humans arrived would have been determined by how long it took Homo sapiens emerging from Africa to conquer the Homo erectus tribe spread throughout Asia. But under the out of Eurasia hypothesis, the length of human occupation of Australia can be greatly extended. In fact, Homo erectus was known to be in the Indonesian archipelago a million years ago. If they had made the crossing to Australia, then hominin occupation of Australia could be anywhere up to 850,000 years. It is generally believed that Homo erectus was not intelligent enough to make the boats that would have been required to cross to Australia. Arguably though, making a raft or a canoe is much easier than making stone tools that can kill large, dangerous megafauna. Furthermore, Homo erectus obviously had a degree of intelligence, as it had crossed large rivers, and adapted to diverse climates on its way from Africa to Europe, Indonesia and China. Homo erectus is also credited with building shelters, up to 50 feet in length, throughout Europe and Asia, so they definitely had the intelligence to build a raft. The only question is whether they were crazy enough to use it to cross open oceans. It should also be noted that the Hobbit was found on the Australian Papua New Guinea side of the Wallace Line. In previous ice ages, Papua New Guinea was part of the Australian zoological regions, and Flores showed signs of both Asian and Australian fauna. The Wallace Line is a stretch of deep water that separates the zoological regions of Asia from those of Australia and Papua New Guinea. Remarkably, 840,000-year-old Homo erectus tools have been found on the Australian New Guinea side, but they are associated with the Hobbit. It should also be noted that New Guinea, Australia, and Tasmania become one land mass during low ice age sea levels, known as Sahul. If these stone tools on the island of Flores are attributed to Homo erectus, that proves that Homo erectus was capable of making the sea crossing. It also proves that after crossing the Wallace Line, Homo erectus had the opportunity to migrate into Australia. Indeed, recent evidence shows ancient humans made it all the way to the Philippines by around 700,000 years ago, where they butchered a pygmy rhinoceros. But at some stage in the last 850,000 years, did Homo erectus make the crossing from Java to Australia? Now, let's go on a hunt for Homo erectus. Recent dating evidence shows that erectus survived on the Indonesian island of Java, long after it had vanished elsewhere. This means it was still around when our own species was walking the earth, and represents the most recent known record of Homo erectus anywhere in the world. In the 1930s, 12 Homo erectus skull caps and 2 lower leg bones were found in a bone bed 50 feet above the Solo River, at Ngandong in central Java. In subsequent decades, researchers have attempted to date the fossils. But this proved difficult because the surrounding geology is complex, and details of the original excavations became confused. Many researchers think the collection of remains represent a mass death event, possibly the result of a lahar. A lahar, which comes from a Javanese word, is the slurry of mud that can flow down the slope of a volcano when heavy rainfall occurs during or after a volcanic eruption. These violent events will sweep away anything in their path. But the original archaeologists believed the skulls to be headhunters' trophies, due to the large number found in one place, and the fact that headhunters in Borneo and New Guinea were around until modern times. In the 1990s, one scientific team came up with unexpectedly young ages of between 53,000 and 27,000 years ago. This raised the distinct possibility that modern humans overlapped with Homo erectus on the Indonesian island. In fact, modern humans have been found on Sumatra, dating to just after the Toba eruption 74,000 years ago. Logically, we can guess that any evidence of humans from just before the time of the eruption, the largest in the least 2 million years, was obliterated. Regarding the study, Professor Chris Stringer, head of human evolution research at London's Natural History Museum, commented, quote, "This is a very comprehensive study of the depositional context of the famous Java Homo erectus skulls, and the study authors build a strong case that these individuals died, and were washed into the deposits of the Solo River. This age is very young for such primitive-looking Homo erectus fossils, and establishes that the species persisted on Java for well over 1 million years," unquote. On other islands in Southeast Asia, Homo erectus appears to have evolved into smaller forms, such as Homo floresiensis on Flores, and Homo luzonensis in the Philippines. This probably occurred because there were limited food resources on these islands. But on Java, there appears to have been enough food for erectus to maintain its original body and brain size.
So very important. This is a very important thing to know real fast. When you hear the word evolved or evolution, just know that means genetic diversity as constant generations are born, you'll have genetic diversities. So that's important to understand when you think about the word evolution, because a lot of times they'll try to put it that something began as degenerate germ and kept on putting on more body parts and building itself and becoming what we are today. That's not what we're seeing. Rather, what we're seeing is a creation that was made that is pretty much having more generations of species. So just like with birds, right? You got one kind, right? You got a kind of feline, and you can have multiple different types of felines that can come from that feline. Just like a human, right? If it was Cain, he can have multiple sons, some big and some small, right? Very important to understand when we think about that concept, that the word evolution, that's all that is really connected to, is actually genetic diversity by different generations. So
The specimens on appear to be between 5 feet and 6 feet in height, comparable to examples from Africa and elsewhere in Eurasia. But why did Homo erectus survive so late on Java? In Africa, the species was probably gone by 500,000 years ago, and in Eurasia it vanished some 400,000 years ago. They were probably outcompeted by other human species elsewhere, but Java's location allowed it to thrive in relative isolation. Homo erectus had nearly double the brain size of any previous hominin, were superb hunters, traveled throughout the Old World, and sailed to ocean islands, and somewhere along the way they got language. Evidence that erectus had language comes from their settlements, their art, their symbols, their intellectual ability and their tools. Erectus settlements are found throughout most of the Old World. And, most importantly for the idea that erectus had language, open oceans were not barriers to their travel. Moreover, sailing demonstrates a level of cognitive development, rivaling even that of modern humans. The erectus accomplishment of paddling across one of the strongest ocean currents in the world, such as around island of Flores in Indonesia, required not only cooperation, but also corrections, instructions and commands. Few detailed instructions or corrections can be given without language. Given these variables, purposeful seafaring, involving intentionally constructed craft, capable of carrying relatively large payloads over considerable distances, is a more plausible model, in light of the increasing global evidence of early humans on many islands. To build and operate boats, erectus needed to talk about what material to collect, where to collect it, how to put the material together, and so on. In addition to the assembly of a raft, the planning for the trip as a whole, and the reasoning for the undertaking, would have all required language. Researchers tracked down the descendants of the Dutch researchers who excavated the Homo erectus remains back in the 1930s. The relatives were able to provide them with photographs of the original dig, maps and notebooks. They were able to resolve much of the uncertainty that had hampered previous attempts to understand the site. Archaeologists excavated part of an untouched reserve area left alone by the Dutch team in the 1930s. Informed by records of the original excavations, the team was able to identify the gravelly deposit, or bone bed, from which the Homo erectus fossils had come from and dated. The researchers opened up excavations on the terraces beside the Solo River, reanalyzing the site and its surroundings. In this study, they have provided what they describe as a definitive age for the bone bed, of between 117,000 and 108,000 years old. This is older than the dates of 27,000 to 53,000 years in the other study, but still much younger than original estimates. However, Professor Chris Stringer sounded a note of caution regarding the final disappearance of Homo erectus. He said, quote, "The authors claim that this is therefore the last known occurrence of the species, and that this indicates there was no overlap of the species with Homo sapiens in Java, as Homo sapiens arrived much later. I'm not convinced about that, as other supposedly late Homo erectus material from Javanese sites, like Sambung-Maken, remain to be properly dated, and they may be younger still," unquote. In an email to this channel, he followed up this statement by saying, quote, "Unfortunately, work suggesting that the Sambung-Maken fossils might be younger than those from Gandong is still unpublished, so I can't say anything more about that at the moment. In my view, there is still potential for a chronological overlap, as there is nothing to indicate that the Ngandong individuals were the last of their species," unquote.
You see what I'm saying? This person is talking to the geneticist themselves, and they're putting all this stuff into a totality to see if this is truly what we're seeing. That there must have been a time that the world just made up some wacky out of Africa concept that was based on some type of eugenic foundation, and that foundation is about to crumble because it tried to go against the biblical narrative. And the biblical narrative said people started outside of Africa. And now we're seeing that even in genetics, people started outside of Africa. So this is becoming one of those things that if you really look carefully at it, the book that we have in our hands might indeed, in fact, be a book inspired, spoken, breathed to the individuals that the Most High trusted to deliver the message, the word of the illustration of the exact directions of the reality that we live in. That's what we're seeing is that we can't fight it. And look at it. The more they fight against the book, how much theories have they tried to throw in the book and it's been broken? They try to say when the book was talking about the Hittites, they try to say the Hittites didn't exist. That was broken. A lot of this stuff happened in the last 100 years. They tried to say that the world used to be finite. Like in fact, they say it was infinite. They said the world was infinite, that it led for the universe. They said the universe had no beginning. Come to find out that they found out that the universe has a beginning. That's why now they teach Big Bang in schools. That came from a Catholic. They got all types of different ideas that just in the last few years is being implemented because they're trying to understand the world. They're trying to understand the world. But this is the understanding of the world that we all diversified from the areas around the Middle East and filled the whole world. But we got to understand that before even modern humans, there were humans before us, just like in the biblical narrative shows. Before the people got off the ark and filled the earth, before the modern groups filled the earth, there were humans before us. They were all there, and then there was other humans that were probably like subhumans. That's why we see it says the sons of man made it with the sons of God made it with the daughters of man. So we see a mix of different groups, but then all of a sudden a catastrophic wipeout causing a genetic bottleneck. And this group ends up filling the whole earth today, right? From I'm talking from this side of the world to that side of the world. It's all the same children of autosome or the genetic Adam and Eve. That's what's important. But the place where they begin is not Africa. That's what we're seeing. So interesting little view on this channel that this person is talking to those geneticists and giving that information. Very important stuff that I think is going to change a generation. I really believe it is. And I think it's important for us to know that this is real science that we're looking at, that this is really pointing to the biblical narrative being very true. But let me hear the rest of this little piece.
Chronological overlap, as there is nothing to indicate that the Ngandong individuals were the last of their species, unquote. The story of human evolution used to be a simple and lonely tale of one species living at one time, and evolving gradually into another species. This evolution took place in Africa, and eventually modern humans, the Homo sapiens, finally emerged from Africa. Indeed, we used to think of human evolution as a progression, with a straight line leading from apes to Homo sapiens. This is embodied in the so-called March of Progress illustration, where a stooping like creature gradually morphs into Homo sapiens, the apex of evolution. These days, however, we know things were far more complicated. This story highlights a mind-boggling truth, that many of the species we thought of as transitional stages, in this onward march, overlapped with each other, in some cases for hundreds of thousands of years. The out of Africa theory, therefore, needs to be revised and rewritten.
So you heard that? The out of Africa theory needs to be revised, reviewed, redone, and rewritten. That's what the out of Africa concept needs. Maybe we should use a book that already has the written narrative in it. Thinking one book of a one name. But let me show you something that I thought was interesting. Let me just show you something I thought was interesting. Someone put a comment here, and I thought it was really interesting. Let me see if I went by it already. I'm gonna see if I can find it. It was just, and I always like to see what people are saying and this stuff. But a lot of people are shocked. Like you should see the comments on this thing, because this person, if you've seen his page, all he does is try to put out scientific stuff, and all of a sudden he hits them with this, and they're like, it's kind of eye opening that this whole time that it might have been that out of Africa concept was a fairy tale. Yeah, it definitely is a fairy tale. Let me see if I can find it. Please explicit human as finding of as well as presence. I just let me see. Let's see. First, I'm gonna see if I can find it. I could build. Let's see if it's this one. No. Let's see. It's a really deep one. Let's see if I can find it. Not that one. Or I'm at the see where is that. He had a deep comment. I have to see if I could find that. Let me see why I can't find that. Oh, here it is. I must have went right by it. All right, so this one. Watch what it says right here. This person named JC. He says, during my university years, I learned the dentation of modern populations and basically one of the places and whatnot. Just learn. He got some interesting information, those things and whatnot. But watch what he says here when he goes on. I'm just gonna go what he's talking about. Just talk about the fossils and everything. And he just says, unless one believes in happy accidents and highly unlikely coincidences, right? Just talk about some of the evidence of where humans develop and everything and the mutation and whatnot. Let me just go to where he puts the point out. Here it is in summary. Here's what he says here. In summary, if I would be capable of successfully breeding with Homo erectus, then I remain as Homo erectus, right? Basically, just saying modify and whatnot. Because when you think about it, if all these subhumans can mate with humans today, then they're basically humans, right? Just different names for these types of humans with different types of genetics, right? It's really what we want to see is the genetics. That's what's the most important thing, is to look at the genetics. Not just one looks different shape than the other, but really looking at the genetics. But he says the point is that the complexity of human evolution makes the use of names lead just basically, he talks about certain problems with names and stuff and whatnot. Let me see if I think he had another comment that I wanted to look at. I'm trying to see if I can find it, or else maybe is he changed it because it looked like he edited it a little bit, so he might have changed it a little bit. But it was an interesting comment because it was talking about that concept of the way that humans are related, the relationship of humans with these species show that they are human, and it might not be that they were that old. It might not be that they're that as old as people think they are. Because that's what I was talking about. A lot of these dates might indeed be exaggerated, but I wanted to show that because this is a piece of a mountain that's about to unfold in the 20th century. This is a piece of a mountain that's about to unfold in the 20th century, and it all had to do with the paper that I was talking about when we had talked about the out of Africa concept. I'll put the video in the description, and I'll have it pop up at the end of this video too to show it. But if any questions, statements, let me know. I just want to quickly let you know about that, and I'll put this little video on this person's page. As I always recommend using discernment. This person is going to go live in 2 hours, but he's going to show Darwin's DNA dilemma. I got to check it out to see what he's talking about with this. What's the dilemma? This person he's a geneticist and whatnot, but he also has like things in the back of his head and whatnot. So you gotta go about it very carefully. No, but I'm gonna check out to see what's going on this person's page, see what he's gonna bring out. So I'm gonna keep watching that. So I just want to quickly show you that obviously taking the information with the wipeout of the Younger Dryas, all the information that's coming out about the out of Africa concept not being true, but the out of Eurasia showing more evidence than out of Africa. And we talked about how A and B groups, right? For example, we talked about how A doesn't actually make your CT groups. When we talk about none of the non-African groups, CT among them, descend from the departed haplogroup A0, right? We're talking quotes from geneticists. Let's talk about these things. I'll put this in the description as well. well. And close this because we don't need this right now. And remember, I was talking about that thing with that's what I'm talking about. The out of Africa concept has evidence that it might have come from the residue of eugenics. So think about that. Think about that concept. So nowadays, by the fossils, you're seeing an evolutionary change, right? When I say evolutionary, this is truly an evolutionary change, right? Going from one type of species to another species, right? We're going from the species of thinking out of Africa concept is true to thinking out of Eurasia is true. So major transformation of the mind. Major transformation of the mind is happening worldwide. Um, very subtly, kind of slow, but it's definitely the truth, right? There's no way around it. There's no way they can support the out of Africa idea no more, because the truth is that the out of Africa idea has no support by fossils. So that's why I wanted to show you that even a long time ago, 1983, the researchers had derived an mtDNA tree rooted in Asia. And remember, I was showing you that was a medical site that was telling you that, not just some random person on the street saying that, hey, did you know that in 1983 they actually pulled up a whole tree of the mtDNA and the Y-DNA originating in Asia? I'm not just showing you some random person that's saying that. I'm showing you that these geneticists had actually found out that they did have evidence, even in 1983, in the midst of eugenics, that humans started outside of Africa. So that's something that's important to kind of take in. So with that, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll put some of these things in the description. Definitely worth checking out. We had talked about this before, and maybe if you see that video that we did, it might make a little more sense. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved, and amen.